important. And over there, it is a battle for freedom. They were a fledgling democracy, and they're being invaded by a totalitarian autocracy. And you have to choose. This is a time for choosing. And it's also a time to remember what America does right, it can do better. And that's going to be part of the conversation today. But what we see here, you just have to look at the television images, the video images on YouTube, Instagram, wherever, and you notice something important. And it's life and death over in Ukraine. No one is talking about pronouns. No one is talking about silence is violence. Real bullets, real bombs are falling on an innocent country. And we have to understand how fortunate we are in the United States. We have a system where people can protest against their government. We have a system where over time the government corrects course. And we have to keep the faith that our system will continue this way because we see what the alternative is. The alternative is Putin. The alternative is Xi in China. And I don't think any American, any Westerner would want to live in that kind of society, unless, of course, they remember the Politburo, in which case they become the elite. That's not going to be the situation for 99.99% of the people. So we are at an inflection point, and with Ukraine as a backdrop, we just need to understand who we are, what we represent to the world, and more importantly, how we can make ourselves better.
And so for people that are just joining us, the call-in number is 914-636-0110. We're talking about Ukraine, we're talking about Russia, we're talking about what happened and what it means to us here in the United States, but also what does it mean for our politics. As you heard Charlie Knapp, our guest, talk about, it is a time for choosing, and it's a clear choice. I mean, you either are going to defend your principles or you're not. And tinkering around the edges is I believe, a wrong approach. I believe it shows weakness. And given the fact that, Ukraine being a fledgling democracy, it should be, pretty clear that, all efforts should go toward just let's defend what we say we believe in. And what I find most interesting is that, Ukraine is the place where President Biden and his son had that business deal. And it's taking it a step further, it just doesn't make any sense that you would treat your business partner in this way. You wouldn't really step up to defend them, even if you had an interest. I mean, your real interest is democracy. And if the alternative is Putin or Xi in China, I don't understand why America is half-stepping when it comes to Ukraine. Like, we get it. They could launch an attack, but doesn't it look like they're already attacking us by virtue of the hacks and all the steps and the measures that they've taken to displace millions of people out of their country and put pressure on the different NATO allies?
It's part of a much larger worldview, and Putin has never been shy in expressing it. He said from the year 2000 that the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century was the demise of the Soviet Union. And he's made it his mission to restore the greatness of Russia, not necessarily the Soviet Union, which only lasted 74 years, but Russia. There's a mystical view of Russia and its position in the world. And interestingly enough, when Putin began his political career, whereas everybody else put up pictures of Boris Yeltsin, who was the president of Russia at the time, Putin was different. Whose portrait did he put up? Peter the Great.
Wow.
One of the most famous or infamous czars of Russia. But interestingly enough, Peter the Great represented an attempt to westernize Russia, to make it part of Europe as opposed to either a Slavic country or part of Asia. And that's always been a battle in Russia for centuries. What exactly are they? What do they represent? But getting back to Putin, he wants to restore Russia, which means you got to get Ukraine back and Belarus back. Period. End of story.
Well, that's just the beginning of our talk with what happened here. Don't change that dial. You're listening to WVOX Whitney Global Media Station. That was our first segment. I'm telling you, everybody, it's going to get hot and heavy. We getting into it. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. And while we're on this quick commercial break, I got to give a shout out to Radar Nutrition. I got to show you guys this. They sent me a very nice note. Thank you, Mayor Thomas, for trying out our products. We know you're going to love it. And as you know, health as well. So right here is Radar Plus. They got some great, stuff. Now, I've always been curious about CMOS. Here you go. This is it. I've always been curious about CMOS. And they got CMOS, and they got some jojoba seed oil, arugula seed oil, some soap. So I'm gonna check this stuff out. I'm just gonna show you guys the different stuff. You should use their promo code Radar5. All right, you'll get some money off, and you should definitely check them out because they got some great stuff. And I've, so I'm gonna show you the CMOS pack. It's a Mount Vernon business. Gonna give them a shout out. Here you go. This is the CMOS pack I just showed you. And then here goes the pills that they have, in case you don't want to go through this whole process of soaking the moss and putting it in overnight in a jar and all that stuff. It's some great options. And then this one right here is my favorite. And I know you're saying, what's going on? Well, this is for your brain focus. So all I can tell you is it definitely helps. I haven't done the CMOS yet. But the other stuff is definitely spot on, helping your energy, helping your diet. So all the distractions, we got to definitely check out. Got to check out the Radar Plus. You can find them on Instagram. We'll get you there. Well, you go to their website, radarplusnutrition.com, and you can find them on YouTube and Instagram at Radar Plus Nutrition on Instagram. Radar Plus Nutrition on Instagram. So check them out. All right, we're coming back from break. Welcome back. You're listening to WVOX at Whitney Global Media Station. My name is Rich Thomas, former mayor of Mount Vernon. You're listening to What Happened Here, where we visit and unpack issues that are important to our community, issues that are important, where make you ask the question of what happened here. And we're here every Wednesday from 12 noon to 1 p.m. We're on 1460 on your AM dial or worldwide at WVOX.com. Our guest today is former AUSA Charlie Knapp, who also served as a Manhattan Assistant District Attorney as well as Inspector General for the City of Mount Vernon. He's here, and we were talking about Ukraine, and we're talking about how Putin is taking an extreme stand to try and restore Russia. And we were discussing exactly why and how America should be making a choice, making a more firm decision in defending freedom and not hiding behind hollow words. So with that, if you want to join the discussion, you have some questions to ask either about Ukraine or the new era of politics that we'd like to discuss for our country, but also locally specific to Mount Vernon, which is in a great position to restructure its politics to actually help people. The phone number to call in is 914-636-0110. Again, that phone number is 914-636-0110. Mr. Knapp, restoring Russia, the steps that they're taking is already coming at an extreme cost. I saw a report yesterday that talked about how the supply of gasoline did not change in the United States. Not sure exactly. They're trying to figure out what really caused the cost of gasoline to spike. You know, it could be panic buying, it could be another measure, but I share that to say that Russian oil really isn't having the loss of it really isn't having the impact on our supply numbers as some were originally claiming. So, in terms of the steps that have been taken to approach how to support Russia, support Ukraine, Ukraine against Russia. We heard today President Zelensky from Ukraine ask the United States to help and a um, call for
No-fly
a
zone.
no-fly zone. And what's your take on that?
Well, let me preface it by saying I'm not a military man. My father was a decorated combat veteran in World War II. So what I have to say, take with a grain of salt. But what I have to say is this. We have to support Ukraine the way FDR supported Britain in World War II when it effectively stood alone against Nazi Germany, because at that point Stalin was still Hitler's ally under the Molotov-Ribbentrop non-aggression pact, which allowed them to carve up Poland, and which really gave Hitler free rein to start World War II in Europe, which is a little bit of history that everyone seems to have conveniently forgotten. But FDR was very clear. He had the Lend-Lease program. We sent destroyers to Britain for the Royal Navy. We sent them all types of ammunition, everything we could afford. And FDR was very clear on the use of that, as was Churchill.
Mm-hmm.
And the concept was, give us the tools, we will win the war. And I think that that's really what President Zelensky is saying. He doesn't expect NATO or the United States to send combat troops to go fight side by side with the Ukrainian forces. That's not on the table. However, what he can reasonably expect is continuous supply of materiel in a war that he did not start, he did not ask for, but he's defending. And for the United States and NATO to fall for Putin's bluff of whatever they do, it'll be viewed as an act of war. Well, you know what? We're already in the economic war with Russia, which is going to have severe consequences for their entire society. Sending Polish jets, remarking them as Ukrainian jets, that's not going to make a difference. It's a gamble, of course, it's a bluff, but given how the Russian forces have shown themselves in Ukraine, there is zero chance that they're going to take on any NATO forces. They'd be cut to pieces. Putin's not going to push a button to send ballistic missiles into Poland, let alone the United States, because he knows that would be the end of him. He's a survivor. He took a shot. He had wrong assumptions in Ukraine. He thought he would be lauded as a liberator by Ukrainians. He thought he'd be in Kyiv in 3 or 4 days. He thought the Russian people would be supporting him. Not much of that has happened at all. And the lesson that we need to relearn, because it's an old one, is that when a dictator tells you he's going to do something, you need to take him seriously. Hitler laid out his entire plan in Mein Kampf. It was ignored. He was a nutcase. He's not serious. When he starts governing, he'll mellow out. He told us, and then he went ahead and did it. The Ayatollah Khomeini did the same thing. His was in Farsi. No one bothered to translate it, and the few Iran experts who looked at it were ignored. But he laid out the revolutionary Shia potential of an Iranian resurgent hegemon in the Middle East, which of course required the destruction of Israel and the annihilation of the Jewish people there. And today you look at President Biden with the Iran deal, where we're so desperate for reasons that have never been made clear to have a deal with Iran to give them $100 billion, which we know because when President Obama gave a first tranche of a couple of billion, it did not go to civil infrastructure. It did not go to unemployment insurance, healthcare, anything. It went to all of the terror groups. So now you have Putin, who's told us 20 years ago what he plans on doing. Guess what? He's doing it, and we pretend to be caught up short. I'm not buying it.
Neither am I, neither should you. Don't change that dial. You're listening to WVOX at Whitney Global Media Station. What happened here is going to be right back from this quick commercial break. I'm telling you, everybody, we got a lot to unpack, and now, when we come back from this break, we're gonna talk about New York, and we'll probably talk a little bit about, bail reform. You've seen all the different acts of violence happen. Most recently, there was a hate crime in Yonkers where an Asian lady was attacked and punched over 125 times just because she was Asian. It's despicable what's going on. But the catch and release program that is in place when it comes to bail reform is broken. And there are lots of problems when you start talking about making adjustments to that system. And the problems really come from extremes on the left, extremes on the right. And it's not just limited to bail reform, it's also energy policy. Energy policy in that, you have people that say all buildings in New York should be fully electric and only electric. We're going to save on emissions from buildings if they move to electric heat only. That's not true, because our energy comes from oil and gas. And with the closure of Indian Point, which was wrong, even more of our energy comes from oil and gas today than ever before. And if things get really bad, you may see some plants, turn back to coal. And I can tell you right now that that's what Germany is doing. Germany went back to coal because they stopped all their nuclear plants, and they went backwards on emissions, and their prices have spiked. So what I can tell you is there's a lot of tricks being played on people when it comes to the extreme views of what green energy should be or should not be. And it's my hope that we get some common sense leveled in the state of New York, so that our energy bills and our energy policies, don't go off the deep end and leave us stuck with a huge price. Con Edison is not responsible for these price hikes. It's the responsibility of terrible energy policies. But you can see the importance of energy becoming a security issue going back to Ukraine. And if you just think about it, there's so many different parallels that are here. And I can only tell you that, I look forward to getting into these issues more and more with you as we get ready to come back from break. But Charlie, I would say, you know, that is a troubling scenario that the Russians do have control of the various nuclear plants in Russia and in Ukraine.
Well, I personally don't think they're going to do much with them. They're just bargaining chips. What's more concerning is how Germany sold itself on the Nord Stream to Russian gas.
Right.
There's a whole story behind that. And, President Trump was right. That never should have been open. The Democrats wanted to, and now, things have spun around and Nord Stream's not happening.
Right.
There's plenty of gas out of the Middle East from Israel and Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And if Lebanon was able to become independent from Iran and Hezbollah, the gas is off the Lebanese coast as well. And there's an underwater pipeline that Greece and Cyprus and Israel we're working on that the US decided that's not green enough, not interested. So we are where we are, but everything is back on the table, I think.
Well, I can tell you right now that it's on and popping, and I just want to give a quick shout out to Wendell Haskins, who was mentioned in the master's program in Augusta as being a trendsetter, a change agent. I read that story on LinkedIn. Congrats to Wen Hogan. I gotta have you on as a guest one day, man. We gotta talk about what you're doing for the culture, for the community of us in golf and in sports. Now we're coming back from break. Here we go. Rich Thomas, the former mayor of 1460 WVOX. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. You're listening to WVOX, a Whitney Global Media Station. My name is Rich Thomas, the former mayor of Mount Vernon, and you're listening to What Happened Here, where we ask the question, what happened here? We're here every Wednesday from 12 noon to 1 p.m. on 1460 on your AM dial or live worldwide on WVOX.com. Today we're talking about new politics. We're talking about Ukraine, Russia, and the conflict, what it means for us here in the United States, but also new politics in general. What can we do to reconcile the extremes? The extremes are really tearing us apart, and what can we do to bring it back together? And when you look at energy policy, there seems to be no room to compromise. When you look at criminal justice reform, there seems to be just a complete disconnect with reality. So we're going to get into those issues, and you're welcome to call in at 914-636-0110. Again, it's 914-636-0110. And our guest today is Charles Knapp, former AUSA for the DOJ in the Eastern District, former Manhattan ADA, also former Inspector General for the city of Mount Vernon. And before we went to break, we were talking about why Putin is, trying to structure a resolution, why he's trying to set up his bargaining chips to exit Ukraine, but also, how he's trying to stay in power. But that's going to be almost impossible given the global pressure that seems to be mounting. So it's, before we take that phone call, I just want to, structure that quick question and Charlie, and just say, hey, do you think Putin, being in this situation, he's going to become more desperate and really hit some buttons to try and stay in power if he is truly isolated and without options for an exit of any sort that doesn't involve him going to jail or winding up dead?
Well, traditionally in Russia, changes have occurred through either revolution or palace coup. That's been the tradition because it's not a democracy. They don't have real elections. There's no impeachment potential. There's a permanent impeachment potential, I suppose.
Okay.
But the problem Putin faces is really also one of information. It's not clear where he's getting his information. It's not clear what he thinks is actually happening. It may be that he believes that he's on his way to victory. It may be that he believes that it's just a hiccup by his armed forces and they'll recover.
No.
They have overwhelming force superiority.
Yeah, but they don't have the will. They don't have the real logistics worked out, and it's apparent that since Ukraine has not fallen within the few day period that they originally planned. I think we have to come back and let's come back to this question. We have a caller on the line. Caller? Hey, Chris, welcome to the show. We're listening. Inside of Ukraine would result in the main entry of NATO into Ukraine. Okay. Because of that, okay, I think the NATO forces should be done starting with all the countries that were in Ukraine and Belarus. And the ground troops would be put up on further for these countries, okay, backed up by European NATO forces and backed up by too. And I think we should already declare a no-fly zone
Donald Trump continues to undermine our democracy. Okay, in every way that he can. He's going to rally the democracy, ruins every aspect of our democracy. Okay, so, and he continues to do that. So,
The only way to solve that problem is through an election, and that's going to come soon. But but coming to Ukraine, just to build on what you're saying, I think that your suggestions are inevitable because you got 2.5 million people that have left Ukraine for NATO countries. And those places are being, they're overwhelmed with the demand on their own systems, be it for energy, be it for food and water. So now you have a real human crisis. What's going to happen if these people cannot return home for an extended period of time, and we don't know how long that's going to be. So at some point, you're going to have fatigue and exhaustion by people in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Moldova, all the places that are surrounding Ukraine saying, look, we love you, we support you, but it's time for you to go home, and we're going to help you get there by fighting with you to reclaim your home. And that's where I think you're right for trying to set up the stage so that Putin is not only boxed in, but these people can go back to their homes and rebuild.
all right, so like Trump said that if he was president yet, then would be happy. Okay. The other part is that he wouldn't have our democracy if he was based on the Trump's direction.
Yeah, if I might jump in for a second, I think you're right. Well, Trump is right in that if he were president, this wouldn't be happening because Ukraine would have been a mess and NATO would not have been organized at all to get munitions in there and do the things that it is doing. So it's not that this wouldn't be happening. Something was going to happen and it would have been far worse. To your points that you made, we already have made it clear that a chemical or biological or nuclear attack would be a red line. Our problem is President Obama had a chemical red line in Syria and nothing happened. So there's a credibility issue here. But I think that the way the forces are lining up, I don't think Putin's going to want to call that bluff. And so what he has been doing is, to use another Trump favorite term, sending out fake news. He said that Ukraine has a bioweapons lab and that the United States and Ukraine are working on a nuclear weapon to use against Russia. So it's the false flag situation where it does happen. And you already have people in the United States. I can think of Tucker Carlson, who seems to be recycling Russian propaganda points. There was the maternity ward was empty, there were fighters in there. It's sort of InfoWars on Fox News.
But these things are going to continue, and this is where our next caller is going to jump in. Next caller, thank you, Chris. Vince, welcome to the program, Vince.
Yep.
Yep. That's a sad point, and that's where I think, Charlie, you want to add to that?
Yeah, the only explanation is I was as confused as you are with respect to the big fighters. What I understand to be the case is that the Pentagon has looked at the numbers And Ukraine has still, I think, 30 or so or 40 operational jets.
So they have the ability to strike back, but you don't change that dial. We're gonna strike this right back up when we come back from break. Don't change that dial. Coming back from break, I told you guys it's gonna be lit on this conversation. We got a lot that we unpacking and getting into, and I can tell you, I just saw a news flash right now that the Saudis are considering using the Chinese yuan for oil sales. So this war in Ukraine is actually, in my view, a trick to create another type of economic war that we already touched upon earlier in the show, that we're already in this economic war with Russia and many others. And now you see how, some of our frenemies, I'm not even gonna say enemies, our frenemies are moving to try and, take our economic power away. So it's really about to be complicated, because if the Saudis do that, then that means the dollar will not be the standard, the global standard for economic transactions, and it creates a real tricky and tenuous situation between the United States and China. So let's see what happens. I mean, I don't know, Charlie. You have any thoughts on that interplay with the Saudis and the currency swap?
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate, but this is the problem when you take a moral position in international affairs where hard interests are at stake. So we had the leftover from President Obama and the Iran deal, which scared the bejesus out of the Saudis, the Gulf states, and Israel, because it was empowering a very destabilizing autocracy, Iran. Trump reversed some of that with the Abraham Accords and a rapprochement. Biden came in and took the cheap, in my view, rhetorical position of, well, they killed Khashoggi, this is terrible, as if Turkey hasn't murdered any number of reporters. And the Houthis are suddenly delisted as being terrorists, and they're lobbing cruise missiles into refineries and airports in Saudi Arabia. And now Ukraine starts, and Biden asks them to ramp up their oil. And, any self-respecting country would say, fine, what's in it for me? And apparently Biden hasn't come up with anything. The most obvious thing would be to restore the Houthis' terror moniker, because it's richly deserved.
Yep.
And help the Saudis defend the oil refineries on which we depend. I don't know why any of that's not been done, but so if the Saudis cannot depend on the United States, they just don't cut themselves free. They look to the other power, the other economic power at the moment, China. Nothing is a surprise. This is a tragedy foretold. We're pushing countries away. It's like everything else. Just because we have economic relationships doesn't mean we approve 100% of everything that goes on inside that country. We have to be a little more mature, I think, and stop imposing our values on everybody else. We have to make sure that we stand by our values internally and hope that other people will follow us by example. But we can't force it. We've learned that any number of times.
Well, you heard him. We're coming back from break. Coming back from break. Here we go. Final segment. We got a lot to discuss. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. You're listening to WVOX, your Whitney Global Media Station. My name is Rich Thomas, the former mayor of Mount Vernon. And the name of our show is What Happened Here, where we ask the question of what happened here. And we ask that question daily, but today's topic has been focused on new politics what's going on with Ukraine, Russia, and what it means for us here in the United States. And we're touching upon historical parallels. We're talking about, new dynamics that are emerging. And our guest today is Charles Knapp, former AUSA from the DOJ Eastern District, former Manhattan ADA, and also former Mount Vernon City Inspector General. And on the line, we still have Vince. And before we went to break, we were talking about confusion around why can't more military tools just be provided and we can get on with this fight and stop the nonsense. So Vince, did I summarize that right? Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm listening, doctor. Hmm. So let me jump in on that and just put some structure around this because everybody, and this is why we asked the question about new politics and how the extremes really miss the point. So somewhere there's money to pay for the services that these new students need. Wait. That's the lazy answer. And that to me is what the problem is when you look at, the politics we have right now. The question I have is how come there's so much waste and how come the monies from the federal government that do not impact your property taxes immediately, they are funded from a different stream of funds that you pay your income taxes. But my question is, how come the education monies that are for the purposes that these students need are not allocated to this need? Well, they can, and I take issue with that. They definitely have access to federal funds, be it. Yeah, no. It is, but I'm saying this is why I think you need these types of conversations because here you have competing priorities. And my priority, having been in this position as mayor, and knowing that the school district has an abundance of resources that it can use, I don't understand why they always take it out on the taxpayer. And that's why I go back to, however they arrived, the federal government has an obligation to pick up that tab. That's okay. One more. I mean, it doesn't matter. I think that the approach that has been taken is what's failing, and that's why I think new politics need to be, really explored. And I just want to add to this very briefly. In Mount Vernon, youth sports, I believe, is very important to the development of children. And one of the things that I wanted to see happen was youth sports be funded for free. These leagues, these basketball leagues, football, baseball, track, just let the parents get a break. They shouldn't be paying a couple $100 every season for their kid to do something that's going to help them develop. And you know what? There's money available in the budget, be it from the federal government through a grant or through existing programs that the city has. I always detest and hate it when they say we're cutting sports, we're cutting busing. It's bogus. It's just it's the wrong priorities through the leadership. And I tell you, Vince, if you look carefully and you sit down with your superintendent, I'll be more than happy to join the conversation. You can find the resources available that does not impact your taxes. For it to impact your taxes, I just think it's a lazy answer. Okay. Well, no, but look at how other countries handle, their immigration, and look at Ukraine, for example. Like, people left Ukraine to go into other countries, and they weren't. Not everybody was welcome. So what I can tell you is there definitely is there's a lot broken with our border, and it does have a marginal impact, and it hurts right here right now with respect to how, these people are being added to the system without their freight being fully picked up by, who should be responsible for it. And no, no, but with respect to the law, and that's why I'm saying, like, I always get frustrated when it comes time to solving these problems. They reduce it to a soundbite, and they expect it to fit into a TikTok, and it should be. Yeah, and that's where the status quo becomes a problem. Now, I will say, Charlie, this is kind of the crux of new politics, and we're approaching the wind down of the show, and this tees up our next conversation. Oh boy, there's no sound. Oh man. I'm sorry for those on Instagram that are watching and there's no sound. I don't know what happened, but something's wrong with the Instagram feed. But nonetheless, as we wind down the show, new politics, can we just lay out a structure for new politics where questions like this can be reconciled through a new political approach?
Well, here's at its most basic, let me just address Vince's immigration issue first, and then I'll get to the larger point. Unless I run out of time, then I'll have to come back.
Yeah.
So there. There's a distinction I think that we have to draw between the immigration laws or lack thereof, and lack of an overall vision of what immigration laws should be, and what happens with the kids and families who come here. To put the cheeriest uh, light on it, I would say this: why do these people come to the United States as opposed to pretty much any other country? And I think the answer is we are viewed by the outside as still the land of opportunity and the land of liberty. And that's something we need to hold on to. Now to, right, no, right, but that, right, but that, I agree. The laws should be enforced. Maybe the whole system needs to be rethought because what we have now is not working. But
That's why we're gonna come back to this conversation, and maybe we have to talk about it next week when we come back from break. You listen to what happened here. As you can tell, there's a lot more to discuss because there's a lot happening here. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. If everybody that's watching on Instagram, I'm sorry about the sound. I don't know what happened, but please go to YouTube or Facebook to check it out. Thank you for joining us. And look, we'll be back next week and we'll have some more of these conversations. Get ready to explore more of what happened here.